It's a new month, it's a new week, it's a new edition of the Israel Brief, brought to you by Lay of the Land with me, yours truly, Rolene Marks, where we take a look at those top headlines making the news in Israel. We do this every Monday to Thursday, come rain, come shine, and the only time we take some time off is if there are Jewish holidays. And thank you to so many of you for all your messages, for all your support. We have a real global community growing, and if you're new to the Israel Brief, welcome to it. It is day 269 of Israel's war with Hamas, which started on the 7th of October following the atrocities following the invasion. Now, the Israel Brief broadcasts in peacetime as well as wartime. So whenever you need your news regarding Israel, come right here and even bring yourself a coffee. It is day 269. We are almost, in fact, we're days away from the 9-month anniversary of that Black Saturday. And of course, we think all the time of the 120 hostages, some of them still alive, some of them who have been murdered, and more about that a little later in the viewer's question. We think of them every single day. We want them home every single day. And 9 months got me thinking about a lot of things, but it also got me thinking about the new Israel that has been gestating for these last months. We are still severely traumatized. We are still on that day, the 7th of October. We are still heartbroken. We are still extremely resilient, because to be resilient is to survive. But we are different people. We are no longer the people that existed on the 6th of October. How can we ever be? We are the new Israel, the post-7th of October Israel. And what that brings with it, we're going to open up a little bit about that right here on the Israel Brief. So let's take a look at those top stories, and we begin with a announcement that came in a short while ago via the Hebrew news site called Walla. A state of emergency has been declared on board a Air Europa flight from Madrid bound for Tel Aviv. Now, we don't have any details why this announcement was made. We are going to watch the story very, very closely. However, yesterday, an El Al flight bound from Warsaw to Tel Aviv was forced to make an emergency landing in Antalya in Turkey following a medical incident with a passenger. Now, all direct flights from Israel to Turkey have been suspended since the 7th of October. In fact, we've seen over the last 8 months the president of Turkey take a very, very pro-Hamas stance, and tensions and the war of words has built up between the Turkish president and Israeli officials. This despite the leader of the Turkish opposition last week saying that he condemns the 7th of October, he condemns Hamas, and Hamas basically murdered Jews asleep in their beds. The Turkish ground staff at the airport refused to refuel the El Al flight, and passengers were not allowed off the plane. However, the plane was eventually cleared for takeoff and forced to make a landing in Rhodos, a Greek island, to refuel there before heading home to Tel Aviv. Earlier today, the Shabak, or the Shin Bet, announced the release of 50 Palestinians who had been arrested over the last 7 months, including the director of Shifa hospital. If you go back several months, you will remember that Shifa Hospital was the site of a lot of focus. The hospital used as a human shield, as a military headquarter by Hamas, which of course, under the laws of armed conflict, changes its status or changes its protected status into a legitimate military target. We know from what we saw, the IDF brought us the evidence visually, what we saw in Shifa Hospital with the tunnels underneath the hospital and the fact that hostages were held captive in that hospital. Well, as you can imagine, the release of the director has drawn widespread condemnation across the political spectrum, including from far-right leader and National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, but also from the center-left National Unity leader Benny Gantz, who said that whoever made this decision should be dismissed immediately. He also went on to say that any government that allows for those that shelter the supporters and the perpetrators of the 7th of October and who held hostages is not fit to run a war during, or not fit to lead a country during an existential war, and called for an immediate election date to be set. The father of Noah Marciano, whose body was found close to Shifa Hospital and who it was believed was murdered inside the hospital. If you do recall, Noah, along with some of the other young spotters or IDF spotters or Tatzpaniot as they're called in Hebrew, were kidnapped from the Nahal Oz base, which quite frankly is one of the worst things I've ever seen in my life. I have been to that base. I have been into that control center. It's just horrific. Noah was taken hostage and she was murdered inside Shifa Hospital, and Noah's father said that he condemns this decision, and he said, "I'm sorry, Noah, but you have been abandoned again." And there was also a statement of condemnation from the Hostages and Missing Persons Family Forum. Earlier today, the biggest barrage of rockets were fired from the Gaza Strip towards the Gaza envelope communities. Now, this is one of the biggest barrages in several months. This was fired at the area of the kibbutzim, the towns that were very, very badly affected by the events of the 7th of October. The IDF have announced over the last few days that they are operating inside the Gaza Strip in places like Shujaya and other places, and also announced yesterday finding a massive tunnel very close to an UNRWA school. You know, will wonders ever cease? I don't think we're surprised anymore to find that tunnels are dug and exist very close to these United Nations facilities. How the United Nations claim they didn't know is absolutely beyond me, and if you ask me, a bold-faced lie. Meanwhile, tensions continue on the northern border. Yesterday, a drone attack injured 18 IDF soldiers, and Iran's mission to the United Nations said on Friday that should Israel instigate a full-scale war against Lebanon, which is where Hezbollah are resident, that they will annihilate the state of Israel. Israel does not want a war with Hezbollah, which would affect the people of Lebanon. From Israel's perspective, a diplomatic solution is far, far more preferred. But should we be forced into any scenario, we are ready for all scenarios. Israel has been trying to galvanize the support of 25 countries at the ICC. If you recall, just last month, Karim Khan, the chief prosecutor, spurred on by people like Amal Clooney and various other lawyers, announced that they would be seeking arrest warrants for Prime Minister Netanyahu and Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. On Friday, the United Kingdom filed at the ICC saying that they don't have jurisdiction to issue arrest warrants for Prime Minister Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant, which for the moment has seen that call be suspended until September. But what is very interesting is that Shurat Hadin, the Israeli Law Center, is initiating procedures against Amal Clooney. They have said, and I'll read you the following. They say, Israeli civil rights Shurat Hadin, representing hundreds of victims of the October 7th terrorist attack, has appealed to U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland, demanding an investigation into Amal Clooney for violating the Federal American Service Members Protection Act, known informally as the Hague Invasion Act. The organization claims that Clooney's participation in the ICC's investigative actions against Prime Minister Netanyahu for war crimes while she was on U.S. soil constitutes a felony under U.S. law. In their appeal, Shurat Hadin noted that Clooney took part in an investigative forum convened to examine evidence against suspects of war crimes and crimes against humanity in Israel and Gaza. What is super, super interesting is that the prosecution team was bound to get on a plane for Israel, and Israel assured full cooperation, but that team did not board that flight. Instead, Khan issued his statement calling for warrants of arrest. So we're going to watch this one super closely. Okay, so it's the time of the show that everybody seems to look forward to, judging by the amount of questions and comments that I get, and that is the audience question. So today's question comes from somebody who also prefers to remain anonymous. Okay, we don't mind, you're amongst family, we're not going to judge. And they are asking how many hostages are still alive. Well, it's an important question, and it's a question that I'm asked often. We assume that tens of hostages are still alive. We don't have proof of life for all the hostages. We know that the IDF and our intelligence agencies are working around the clock to try and see who is still alive, who was murdered in captivity, or who was murdered on the 7th of October and whose body is held captive in the Gaza Strip. We still do not know the situation for the Bibas family. That's a question I get asked a lot. Baby Kfir Bibas, who has now spent the majority of his life as a hostage, his brother Ariel, their mother Shiri, and father Yarden. We have heard from Hamas who have said they don't know where all the hostages are and if they're still alive. Whether we believe that or not, we don't know. So at the moment, it is assumed that tens of hostages are still alive. And whether the hostages are alive or no longer with us, we want them all home now. And that brings me to the end of today's broadcast, guys. Please don't forget to check out our website at www.layoftheland.online, our Facebook page at Lottelsat. Welcome to new community members. Our YouTube channel right here at the Israel Brief. Please click that red subscribe button. And we are on X at Lay of the Land 5. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. I will see you tomorrow for another edition of the Israel Brief. Bye for now.